It's 3:12 a.m. You wake up and your hand is already moving toward the phone on the nightstand before your eyes are open. You don't remember deciding to check it. You just are. That reflex, that small, involuntary reach toward a fragile thing in the dark, is older than farming, older than language as we know it, older than almost anything you'd call human. It's at least 1,000,000 years old. And last night, without knowing it, you performed a version of the oldest night shift on Earth. So why does a mind built to sleep keep waking up to check something? Let's rewind further than you think. Long before matches, long before the word for fire existed, there was coal, no wider than your thumb, buried under a thin skin of gray ash, and somewhere near it, in the dark, a human being was awake, because if that coal went out, the next day would not begin the way the group had planned. We tell ourselves, fire was discovered. One clean moment, lightning, a spark, a hero. But that's not what the ground says. Deep inside Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, more than 30 meters from the entrance, researchers have found layers of burned bone and heat-altered sediment in deposits stretching back beyond 1,000,000 years. No wildfire reaches 30 meters into a cave. Someone carried it in, again, and again, and again, which means fire, in the beginning, was not owned. It was borrowed from the world. And the moment you borrow something from the world, someone has to keep it alive. Picture the scene. A cool night, a shallow hearth on a cave floor. Bodies asleep at unequal distances from the warmth. The smallest ones closest, the strongest ones nearest the entrance. Ash pale in the moonlight, dark beside the ember. And one pair of eyes, half open, watching a red line inside a blackened branch shrink by the minute. They don't have a match. They don't have a lighter. They don't have the guaranteed ability to make another one of these. If this ember dies, they will spend tomorrow not hunting, not resting, not eating, but searching. For smoke on a horizon, for a neighbor, for a strike of lightning that may not come for weeks. That is the weight sitting on top of one glowing coal the size of a thumbnail. And this is where a myth needs breaking. The person watching that coal was not sitting on a stone throne with a title. There was no priest of the flame. The word keeper is our word. A modern label for something that was probably far quieter and far more shared. The keeper was whoever happened to wake, whoever was already up nursing a child, whoever's back hurt, whoever's dreams were shallow that night. The job was real. The job title was not. But the danger was extremely real. And here's the strange part. It wasn't mostly the leopard beyond the light. It wasn't mostly the hyena laughing in the far dark. The real enemy was smaller than all of that. It was fatigue. It was smoke drifting into tired eyes. It was the way a fire, when nothing dramatic is happening, quietly starts to die. Because a hearth doesn't just burn or go out, it passes through stages. Bright flame, then glowing combustion, then an ember insulated beneath its own ash, then cold charcoal. The maintenance challenge lives in the invisible middle. The fire that looks safest is often the one already failing. You can watch it for an hour and see nothing wrong. And then, in a single minute of inattention, the recovery window closes. That's what made this the deadliest job. Not the mortality rate, the consequence per mistake ratio. A single lapse could reorganize an entire following day. Cold food, cold children, a group forced to travel hungry, a negotiation with strangers, and every dry, ordinary, unremarkable morning was proof that someone in the darkness had not lapsed. Now here's where the story gets stranger, because fire wasn't only something to guard, it was something to feed. Before the sun set, someone had to look at the wood pile and predict the entire night. How cold will it get? How much fuel is dry underneath? Which branches will catch fast? Which will burn slow and long? Which look dry but hiss with hidden water? In experimental hearths, archaeologists have watched what happens when you get this wrong. The fine grass flares up beautifully and dies in 90 seconds. The thick log smothers the coal beneath it and turns everything to smoke. A fire can starve while surrounded by trees, which means someone in that group had to think in tomorrows, not in flames, in tomorrows. That's not a small cognitive step. That's the beginning of a certain kind of mind. And this is the part I've always found hard to accept, that primitive and sophisticated were never opposites. Reading and rereading these studies, the same picture keeps forming. Ancient humans were not simple people managing a simple flame. They were technicians of a system with 4 dials: fuel quantity, fuel quality, oxygen, burn rate, and every one of those. That is the psychological texture of the job, not the predator. The judgment call, over and over again with no one to check your work. And here is where the shape of it changes. Because no single human, in any climate, can do this every night for a lifetime. The body won't survive it. So what did they actually do? Researchers studying the Hadza of Tanzania, one of the few remaining hunter-gatherer societies, followed the sleep patterns of a group of adults across many nights. What they found surprised them. In more than 200 hours of observation, there were only a handful of minutes when every single person in the camp was asleep at the same time. Not because anyone was assigned to guard, because human beings naturally don't sleep in perfect unison. Older adults wake earlier, young adults stay up later. Nursing parents rise for the baby, light sleepers rise for a sound, a cough, a dream. Distributed across a small group, that variation becomes something remarkable. It becomes coverage. Nobody guards alone because nobody has to. Read that again, slowly. The traits we call flaws in modern life, the night owl who can't fall asleep, the light sleeper who wakes at every creak, the elder up before dawn, those weren't defects. In a small camp around a fragile fire, they were the infrastructure of survival. Your grandmother waking at 4 in the morning was not a bug. It was the human sentinel network doing its job. Your brain still carries this program. That's why you sleep better when someone else is home. Why a parent hears the baby before the monitor beeps. Why a partner's steady breathing beside you feels safer than any lock. Somewhere inside you, the ancient logic is still running. Rest is easier when evidence of another person's attention is present. But this is where the ancient world quietly won, and the modern world quietly loses. Because the ancient watch could be handed off, physically, visibly, a hand on a shoulder, a stick placed in reach of the next waker, a whispered acknowledgement before lying down. The relief was real because the handover was real. Modern life kept the vigilance. And removed the handover. You know this feeling, even if you've never named it. It's the moment you climb into bed and remember the door, you know you locked it. You even remember locking it. But your body won't let it go until you get up and check. It's the moment you stare at the ceiling running through tomorrow. The appointments, the messages, the child's medication, the bill, the alarm. It's the low-grade hum of being on watch for a fire you can no longer see, in a house where the flame has become 100 quiet systems no one else is tracking. Ancient humans checked the ember before rest. You check the stove, the lock, the battery, the message thread. Same instinct, different fuel. And here's what I think is the deepest part of this story, the part almost no one names out loud. You are not checking whether danger exists. You are checking whether you failed. That's the ancient nerve. That's the firekeeper's real burden. The fear was never mainly of the leopard. It was of waking up in a group that trusted you and discovering that while you slept, something small and preventable had ended. The vigilance runs so deep because the shame ran so deep. In a small group, unreliable was a life sentence. So we inherited the checking. But something else was lost. The ancient keeper, whoever they were on any given night, got to hand the watch to someone else and go back to sleep, knowing the fire and the group were still connected. The modern watcher often can't. There is no one physically taking over. The email keeps arriving. The account keeps updating. The child keeps depending. The system keeps running through the night, and the mind that tracks it keeps running with it. We kept the vigilance. We lost the circle. Which brings me back to that coal. The one from 1,000,000 years ago, glowing under its skin of ash. And to the strangest realization of all, the real invention of fire wasn't heat. It wasn't cooking, it wasn't even light. Those were the products. The invention was trust. Trust that the person gathering wood in the afternoon would return before dark. Trust that the person who woke at 3 would notice the shrinking flame. Trust that the person you handed the watch to actually understood it. Trust that if you closed your eyes, the world you woke into would still exist. Sleep, real sleep, the kind that puts you fully under, is not a biological event. It's a social one. It's the deepest thing one human can offer another. Permission to become defenseless for 8 hours, believing they will still be here when you open your eyes. The hearth was where humanity practiced that, every night, for 1,000,000 years. And that's why the smallest morning ritual, a wisp of smoke, a warm stone, a hand held to the ash, could carry more meaning than any monument. Every ordinary sunrise was proof that trust had held. That someone, invisible now in the daylight, had watched what needed watching, fed what needed feeding, and stepped back without being thanked. If you look carefully at your own life, you'll find them. The person in your family who notices when the supplies are low. The colleague who catches the mistake before it ships. The friend who remembers the appointment you forgot. The parent who wakes at the first small sound. They are the fire keepers now, and most of them, like the ancient ones, do the work in a language no one is listening to. Prevention leaves no evidence. A morning without disaster looks exactly like a morning where nothing happened. That's why, when you wake at 3:12 a.m. and your hand moves before your eyes do, you are not broken. You are not paranoid. You are not weak. You are a species that spent 1,000,000 years learning that the smallest fragile things are worth checking on. You are the descendant of every unnamed person who sat awake in the dark and refused to let the light go out. You've been carrying this longer than you realize. But there's something even the firekeepers didn't know. Something none of their vigilance could prevent. Because one morning, somewhere, the ash was cold. The horizon held no smoke, and no matter how carefully the ember had been guarded, it was gone. What happened next, what a small group of humans did when the last ember died, is the moment everything we call civilization actually began. That's next. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Back Times, hit the bell icon, and share this video with someone who loves history.